More fortunate than the living who are still alive. Better than both is he who is not who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Okay, so our sometimes pessimistic preacher here in Ecclesiastes is looking around at the world conditions and going, okay, what's going on here? And it's oppression. I see the oppression that goes on. I see the tears of the oppressed, the powerlessness of those who are being oppressed versus the powerful. And then there's a couple of really weird things that he says here, we're going to talk about in a second. That's not something that's gone away, is it? Do we still see the oppressed and the oppressor? We still see the powerful taking advantage of the powerless. And those who are crying out for justice, I guess. Not getting an answer. I wish we didn't have to see it. Is that a good way of summing up what he has to say here? But there's some really strange things that he says. Right? So I'm confused by them. I've got a little bit of an idea of what he might be meaning here, but just, all right. Verse 2. And I thought the dead who are already dead. Does that seem redundant to anybody else but me? And the living who are still alive. I came across one commentator who says that what they thought of as what some would think of as life was good life, right? Well, doing well. And those who weren't doing well, they were considered dead already. I don't know if that's 100% sure what he's trying to get at here. I really don't. And maybe it makes some kind of sense out of it, but I think we can work our way down that rabbit hole if we want to, but we're going to miss something if we do. The difference between the one who is dead and the one not been born is that, and what the dead and living have in common, I guess, is that the dead and living have witnessed this and been frustrated by it, would be my guess. Would be my other way of reading into that. They've witnessed this and they're frustrated by it, but the one who is better off in all this is the one who hasn't been born, hasn't experienced it at all, hasn't been the oppressor, hasn't been the oppressed, and hasn't got to see it even when it's happening. There may be, maybe there was a prescription this guy ought to have been on. I don't know. But what do we say to that? I don't think he's really asking for an answer here, but I think it's worth thinking about. What do we say to that? I really don't think we can go, it's not happening, because it is happening. Now, granted, I don't really want to jump down in something I can't get out of, but there are some people who claim to be oppressed that we would go, I'm not sure you are. Right? And among that, just so we're clear, sometimes it's us. Of going, oh, they're all out to get us because we're Christian. Listen, we enjoyed favored status in this country for a couple hundred years. Just because we're not the favorites anymore doesn't mean we're being oppressed either. Most of us drove here and didn't have to hide for fear of having our head cut off. Right? So sometimes we can take that a little bit too far. And sometimes when we see everything in terms as oppressed and oppressor, that doesn't really, it's not really helpful either. because it can really translate very quickly to, well, it's not my fault, right? It's not my fault. I can't help it. But at the same time, we cannot deny, I don't think we can deny and shouldn't deny the reality that is that there are people who are oppressed and there are people who oppress them. Now, I guess the first thing that we ought to shoot for is not to be the people who are oppressing others. That agree? Everybody agree with that? I mean, that should be, we shouldn't be the oppressors. But I guess maybe my deeper question to this is, so how do you answer somebody who sees this the way this guy sees it? So I'm gonna say two things really quick before we move on to the next section, but two things really quick. The first one is that I think that we can be confident, and I hope that we're all confident, is that this is not, this idea of oppressors and victims and those kinds of things is not the way that God intended this to work. With me? When it comes to, I'm just kind of thinking through this really quickly, but if you think back to the creation narratives, what you find is that there is some authority given to humanity, right? In the original creation story, given over the creation, but to care for it, not to destroy it. That make sense? Right? They're to keep and to cultivate the garden. And as far as prior to the fall, there's not that I can see this idea of oppression or dominion between Adam and Eve. It's a together thing. It's only after this that we see these desires come in conflict and one will rule the other. Okay? So that would be my first thing, is God didn't intend it that way. And I think we've mentioned this before, I'm certain that we have, is that as people who are a part of his kingdom, goes back to the first thing, is we shouldn't try to be the oppressors, and what we should be are people who try our best to alleviate that and exemplify what it's supposed to be like. Does that make sense? Right? All right. Now, the next question. The next question that he asks is how I've got it worded. To work or not work? That is the question. Right, here we go. Verse 4. Then I saw all toil and all skill in work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 handsful of toil and striving after the wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil. His eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This is also vanity and an unhappy business. Whew, talk about somebody taking both sides, right? Work? Yes. But no. Right? Work? Yeah, you should work. However, maybe this one hits us more in the face than some of the other things. I hope not. That all toil and all skill in work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. Oh, that hurts. That I've got to do better than the guy next to me. I got to do better than the people next door. I can't be seen as being behind, right? And so all work, all skill, all toil. is meant to satisfy this, that he's going to end up saying that you're never going to find, chasing after the wind. However, the answer to that is not to just quit, right? The fool folds his hands, eats his own flesh. But you also have to pay attention to why it is you're doing what you're doing. You may disagree with this. There's a lot in this. There's a lot in this to see, but one of them is this idea of balance. Have you noticed this there's a lot of this in Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of this in wisdom literature, period. This idea of balance. So I saw this guy, he has no one else, which means he has no descendants, which seems to be the idea here. And he's working and he's working and he's working, but never bothers to ask why. And maybe it's back up to the envy of the neighbor again. And there's no thought given, there's no rest given. We need a balance. A long time ago, I heard this. It was from, I think it was Zig Ziglar. Anybody know that name? Right, some know that name. Who talked about this idea of work-life balance. Well, I hope I can do this justice. And he says we're at work, and we're thinking about, okay, well, this is the stuff I've got to do when I get home. And then we're home, and we go, oh, this is all the stuff I need to get done at work. And then the next day, it's the same thing again. And he goes, and we find we're not getting anything done. And he goes, no wonder we're not getting anything done. We're always traveling. Huh? When we're at work, our mind's at home. When we're home, our mind's at work. And this is what this guy's seeing. They're going, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something more to this. Because if not, the word that he uses, what he gets translated vanity, some would have meaningless. And I don't know. It's hard to disagree with that. We go, this is it? Now, I want to jump into this next section because this is one of those spots. This is one of those spots where he begins to zero in on something that has meaning. Okay? So here we go. Let's go start in verse 9. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. If they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to throne, though in his own kingdom he had been poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's palace. There was no end to all the people, all of whom he led, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after the wind. Okay, there's a lot here, but we're gonna jump into this. I think where he starts here in verse 9 is he's starting to zero in on something. There's a hint at there's something with meaning. And in a word, it's relationship. Or maybe community, we might think. There's something about this togetherness that is hard for him to go, okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. right? Most of the things we've run across with him is like, well, took a look at it, and that doesn't mean anything. He's having a hard time with this one. He's having a hard time just shuffling this one off because there's something to it. Two are better than one. Because they have a good reward for their toil. Two are better than one. Because if something happens, they can help one another. Two are better than one. Because to be able to keep one another warm. Two are better than one because if something happens, you have someone with you to ward it off, right? He's kind of speaking in terms of an attack. I've stolen this from somebody I heard years ago because that's always fun. But I remember the guy saying this, and I don't know to that point in my life I'd ever heard it put this way, but it's something that I can't get out of my head now. A lot of times we say or think or, again, say out loud that Jesus Christ came to save me from my sins. True enough. Yes? Right? We're in agreement with that? Okay. We can do this. It's okay. All right? Which problem is with him, he goes that we stop there. And that's not all there is to it. That's true as far as it goes, but Jesus came to call together a people, a kingdom. And the kingdom is going to be made up of more than one of us. And so this idea of calling together seems to be very important. And so as our writer here in Ecclesiastes, who has tried to be pessimistic about everything, he's having a hard time with this one because this one gets to something that actually has some meaning to it. One another. Together. Now, there's some things that go along with that I think we know. I think we know this very, very much. What it means to live in community and the requirements that has. Now they're mentioned here. I've got them out of order, but they're mentioned in this text. One of them is that if we're going to do this and we're actually going to be a genuine community, one of the things that we have to be able to do is that we have to be able to be vulnerable. Who wants to volunteer for that? Any hands? Okay, I didn't think so. Because it's not a fun place to be. He mentions it here, right? How can one be warm by himself? Vulnerable. Now, what he's talking about, I believe, okay? He's not necessarily speaking of husband and wife relationships here. What he's talking about is two that are traveling. Two that are traveling, and when nightfall comes and it's cold, it requires some vulnerability to stay warm. Wouldn't you agree? But that's not fun. What that means is that I have to do this, if I'm going to be vulnerable, that I have to trust you. I have to trust you with very fragile things. Very, very, very important things and things that I have kept very, very close to me that I won't let anybody else see. But I have to let you see them. I have to let you in on it. All right? But for that, it also requires trust. Just a quick question. we're not going to ask the stranger at Walmart to hold our wallet, are we? Right? You're going, here, hang on to that. I'll be back in a little while. Huh? Why not? They may be in completely trustworthy people. Okay, let's don't disparage all the strangers. They may be very, very trustworthy people, but we don't know that. Because there's never been any kind of a demonstration to us that they can be trusted. That make sense? Are we going to be vulnerable and open with people who have never demonstrated that they can be trusted? Of course we're not. Of course we're not. So it is on us not only to say, okay, here's the fragile things, but not just that, but you can trust me with your fragile things. And that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over a lot of time spent together in various situations and learning what it means to be community. It requires this vulnerability. It requires humility. Oh my goodness. Nobody likes that either. Or confession. Boy, all the things that none of us like. But all the things that are absolutely necessary. And the things that again, our very pessimistic writer who looks for any reason to go, that doesn't mean anything, can't do it with this. So maybe that's something we ought to think about. Here's the other one this may be the hardest one. Are you ready? I'm glad you're sitting down. Open-mindedness and teachability. Oh, I hate that. I'd just seem to be vulnerable, wouldn't you? Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. You guys probably get tired of me repeating things, but I can't let this one go. It's just been one of those things. It's one of those things that rattles around in my head a lot. Everybody in this room, yes, everybody in this room. Oh, let's do a fun one. Everybody in this room, I believe, has an opinion. We could stop there. But we could pick a specific. It doesn't matter, right? Maybe it's politics. That's always fun, right? There's all kinds of fun things. But everybody has an opinion, and you hold on to that opinion because you believe, and I believe, that opinion is the right opinion. Yes? Does anybody here, I want to know because, does anybody here hold an opinion that they know is wrong? Okay, good, because that means you're not crazy. If you hold to an opinion that you know to be wrong, it's insane. Right? But we all believe that the opinions that we hold are right. However, what if those opinions aren't the same about the same subject? Then what happens? Are we, this, by the way, this ties into living together in community and the thing that God's called us to do. Are we open-minded and teachable? That doesn't mean, okay, so that gets scary, okay? Can I just say it's scary? Because we go, wait, hold on a minute. Then wait a minute. Do I not know anything? I mean, chance is good for me that I don't know much. But it doesn't mean that our opinions are necessarily wrong. It just means, are we open to listening to what somebody else has to say? And are we willing to sit with somebody and learn what makes us different? Some time back, you all suffered through this. On Wednesday nights, we went through various world religions. And it's easy for us to stand here on any given day and say, this is what those people over there think. This is what they think about this. And there's a lot of that going on, by the way. There's a lot of vilifying of other people. I'm not saying that it's always wrong. I'm also not saying that it's always right. And matter of fact, it's probably less right than it is the other way. But we don't know that unless we're willing to sit down with them and say, what do you think? There's another phrase that a preacher friend of mine suggested that we use more and more. And it's a very, very simple little statement. Tell me more. Tell me more. He illustrated this in a really great way. Yeah, I've got a little bit of time. Okay, he illustrated this in a very, very great way. He talked about preaching a sermon. He said, I was standing at the back of the auditorium, and a lady came through who did not like my sermon. And he goes, I knew she didn't like it because she threw her purse at me. He goes, it tipped me right off that she's not happy about this. The sermon had focused on, it was preaching against racism. And her statement was, and I'm going to do my best to do this justice. Her statement was, it's people like you that keep this racial tension things stirred up. And he said, okay, tell me more. And she kept going down this road. He said, he goes, as I happened to be standing there, he goes, it's just the way that it worked out. There was one of our elders and his wife who happened to be African American, are standing not far away. He said, I stopped. I said, excuse me just a minute. He goes, I called, the wife came over. The elder's wife came over. And he said, tell me something. What's it like to be black here where we are? In this particular town where we are. She said, it's not as bad as it was. And he said, okay. He goes, well, then what do you mean by that? I can walk down the street and not continually look over my shoulder. He said the woman who had come out and thrown her purse at me, he goes, she is just wide-eyed at this point. And he goes, and the thing is that she had no idea what it was like. And a lot of this could be dealt with, and a lot of it was, he goes, they continued to hash out, he goes, with this idea of going, just tell me more. Tell me more about that. Right? We've got to be able to say to somebody, tell me more. That doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you when we're done. And it also, come on, we got to get out of this, and I think we are, but I hope we are. Out of this mindset is if I don't disagree with you, then I don't like you. Right? If I don't agree with you, then I must not like you. That's what I meant to say. I didn't say that right the first time, but that happens a lot. Right? And that's not true. It's just not true. I don't think there's anybody that and I don't think we can even argue about this one. Would be fun if we could, but we won't. I don't think there's anybody that demonstrates what it's like to love people any better than Jesus. You? You agree with that? Jesus probably demonstrated that as well as anybody ever. Yes? Okay, good deal. I'm just making sure. Okay. Jesus didn't agree with everybody either. But Jesus listened. And I think there's something we can pick up, especially as we think about what it means to live as a community with one another, is to be able to listen. One of the things that, and this is an old book now, the way things are moving, but I think it's about 20 years old or so now, a book written by Gabe Lyons and David Kinnaman. The title of the book is Unchristian. So there's a page turner, but it's very, very good. It's they're part of the Barna Research Group, but what they did was they went out and actually interviewed people and sat with people who are not Christian. Some who had been and left, some who never have been. And what they wanted to know was, how do you see us? How do the people outside the church see the people inside the church? And I can't remember all of them. I wish I could. It's a great book. Matter of fact, I think it's in our library back there, but you can look it up. It's really good. But there's several things that kind of surfaced over and over throughout these things. One of them was they are closed-minded. And another one was, it's not a safe place to express doubt. That hurts a little. Because if we are to be a genuine community, how about let's narrow it down a little bit better than that? What if we are to be called the family of God? Is it, do you find it in your family, or how about this? Let's get even more personal. Do we find this, husbands and wives, that we don't want to express doubt to the other one? That we don't want to question, and we're closed-minded to whatever they say? My guess is, for those who have been married any length of time at all, the answer to that is no. Right? We're free to express doubts. We're open-minded, even when we don't want to be, right? But we are, right? Because that's what it means. That's what it means to live together. And we are called the household of God, the family of God. We ought to be able to do that. Right? We ought to be able to understand, right, as hard as this is, to admit that I don't know everything. Right? That I'm not always right. And there's a chance, right? I mean, it's a slim chance. There is a chance that I'm wrong. And I got to be able to hear that. Because if not, what we end up with is living inside of an echo chamber. Where whatever we say is said by everybody else. And we're never challenged. We never have to think. And all of a sudden, we become closed off and kind of misses the mission. Right? Okay. One more thing. One more thing before we end this chapter. I told you we might get into chapter 5. It's going to be close. I wonder about this too, this is just a side note in this section. Excuse me, starting in verse 14, for he went from prison to throne, though in his own kingdom he had been poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after the wind. There's something about that section, and I don't know this for sure, but there's something about that section that reminds me of the Joseph story. Right? The one who was to stand in the king's palace, the one who they went from prison to throne. And I really think, the more I think about this, the more I think he's setting something up here. Right? And that is, so if you think about this, just walk with me really quickly through Joseph. Joseph, who is sold as a slave in Egypt, ends up in prison, ends up in Pharaoh's court as the second in command of all Egypt, rescues all kinds of people, right? Because of this program that he establishes of saving food during the good years, so they'll have it during the famine. And then as you turn the page from Genesis into Exodus, almost the very next thing is, nobody remembered. Then a king arose over Egypt that didn't know Joseph or what he had done. A couple of things really quickly, and one is that this idea of the way that we live in community and this relationship thing, he's not left that, I don't think, are the things that will last. In those are found the things that will last, that we'll pass these things along to the next generation behind us, and things will keep moving in that way. It's not necessarily our accomplishments of envying our neighbor or the workaholism that seems to want to take over, but it's the other things that will last. So there's where we put our hope. All right? Forgive me, but we're going to stop right there. Man, it's 5 minutes early, so I want you to write that down somewhere. So if we go 5 minutes late next week, we're all going to balance. Everything will work out. Huh? Let's pray. Father, we love you, and we thank you so much that you've called us together as a people. That you've called us together in community and in family so that we don't have to walk this road toward you alone. Help us with the things that requires. Our willingness to be humble, to be vulnerable, to be trustworthy people of high integrity, but also be open-minded and teachable. Help us to look to you, to follow Jesus a little closer today, and help us to become the people you've called us to be. We're thankful for the meaning that we have because of the hope that you've given and the demonstration of that by sending your Son. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen.